Hello ladies and gentlemen and otherwise, what's up? My name is Devious. Welcome to this faction breakdown video of one-page rules of Dark Future. So, first and foremost, before anything else, I already talked to Old One Eye about this. He's a very cool homie. This is purely a mechanical breakdown. This is about numbers and abilities and the actual gameplay on the tabletop. If you are more interested in the lore of one-page rules and their grimdark future, I would highly recommend checking out Old One Eye at his channel, One Page More. Talked to the homie, and I got permission to leave a link in the description. Go check it out. He recently did a Jackals video, basically on my request, and that was very, very Chad of the homie. Very Chad and move, if you know what I mean. And yeah, he's also hosting a tournament that I am playing in, and there's going to be some more of that in the future. So if you want to see any of that shenanigans, go check it out. Subscribe to the homie and me while you're at it. You know, definitely subscribe to me and like the video before you go. Just, you know, as a courtesy. That being said, this is going to be a very quick breakdown of each individual faction. I probably said that already. Essentially, what I did was I ran through each faction's units, kind of tried to get a feel for what they were good at, what they were bad at, what they were okay at. Read through numbers, abilities, upgrade options, general synergies, as much as I could stomach, and then just kind of compacted that, and I am now regurgitating it for you. Wonderful flowery wordplay, I know. And yeah, again, this is very much from the perspective of a new player. I am not amazing at the game. I can play really aggressively, and that tends to throw people off, but those are just kind of like, it's the 1-2 punch in boxing. Everyone knows that trick once you get past the amateur stage. So, yeah, the intention here is for you guys to just throw this on and essentially listen to it like a podcast. Enjoy my barely coherent rambling, and hopefully, if you're new to OPR, you can get a feel for which faction does what and maybe find your forever home among them. And if you already know OPR, hey, you can get a quick snapshot of what a new player feels and sees and assumes when he reads the stuff. And by the way, One Page and On, hello, if you're here. I don't know if you're actually going to see and watch this, but yeah, I saw a gap in the market and I decided to fill it. Hope you don't mind. I know he probably doesn't. But anyway, I really appreciate you talking with me about the Jackals, by the way. I understand that I was whining at the moment. I do apologize. Now that I've successfully dropped all of the tea, let's get into this. Alien Hives. Options. You have a bioform for everything, and you are definitely willing to fight about it. Most basic infantry units can upgrade with Furious, Poison and Melee, or No Retreat to take wounds instead of being pinned. A number of more elite options can get regeneration, including all of your big monsters, making them unreasonably resilient. Generally average quality and defense at around 4-ups. With quite a few better options depending on how many points you want to spend. The most expensive unit would be the Hive Tyrant with Explosive Spit and either Hive Carrier or Wings for a staggering 1,200 points, right about. And the cheapest is the humble Hive Swarm at 65 with a very affordable 5-point upgrade for Ambush. For the Battle Brothers, options, but more elite than with the Alien Hives. Generally more expensive and higher quality than other factions, but you have excellent numbers across the board. Everything is 3-up or better on quality and defense, with the sole exception being your Pathfinder units for a fairly decent light scout detachment. Infantry and vehicles have strong offensive and defensive options. If you run into an army that counters you, generally it's because you picked the wrong unit upgrades for that target. No Titan options, but very good aircraft to make up for it. High AP armies can cause you trouble, though. That's just kind of a general thing. The most expensive unit is the Heavy Tank with Quad Laser Cannon upgrades, Dozer Blade, Hunter Missile, and Twin Miniguns for a respectable, right about 1,000-ish points. And the cheapest would be the Pathfinders with Heavy Pistol and Close Quarters Weapons at about 110. Oh, spicy. Unless you count the stock Elite Pathfinder and Master Brother heroes, those are under 100. Quick note, no separate entries for the other flavors of Brothers, but very quickly, just so I don't leave them out, Blood Brothers have Furious across the board, a couple extra unit options and do well in melee. Dark Brothers are stout folk who do not run from a failed morale check. Night Brothers have powerful psychic resistances and lots of casters, but fewer units overall. Watch Brothers get Purge, which multiplies their hits on 6s when shooting within 12 inches, also fewer unit options. And Wolf Brothers have counterattack across the board, allowing them to attack first when charged, and a couple extra aggressive unit options. It's fairly straightforward. Blessed Sisters, Faith through Firepower. All shooting units have Devout, which gives you more ranged hits within 12 inches on a natural 6, and the melee specialists all have Furious, which does the same thing for melee attacks, or Frenzy, which is Furious but with extra AP. Generally average quality and defense with surprisingly good mobility and several flavors of ambush troops and some devastating and cheap firepower in the support sisters. Solid vehicles and walker support, but no aircraft. The most expensive unit is the Blessed Titan by far, with the Titan autocannon and hull machine guns for a prohibitive 1,300-ish points, and the cheapest are the Fanatic Sisters for some aggressive melee buzzsaws for about 85. Surprisingly, they get even better. You can throw dual arc flails on them for more attacks and rending, and Flagellant for regeneration, which only brings the total up to 90 for a cheap but very tough melee frontline. Custodian Brothers. So imagine the Battle Brothers, but even more elite, and you're most of the way there. With the presence of anti-psychic sisters and some of the toughest, especially with upgrades, across the board, you have a horrifically expensive, but also somewhat horrifically strong group of professionals. Most infantry has an option to gain regeneration and a combat shield, meaning they can potentially just ignore wounds and reduce AP, so they might not take those wounds in the first place. Quality of 3 up for basically everything, with options to upgrade it further in several cases, and a defense of 2 up more often than not make this army the definition of quality over quantity. Vehicles are predictably tough, with plenty of options for weaponry, and while a Titan is present, there are no aircraft. Oh, and everything has Fearless, and they're less likely to fail morale checks. The most expensive unit is the Custodian Battle Tank with Storm Rifle Hunter Missile for a pretty decent 1,000-ish points, while the cheapest are the Hunter Sisters for 105, though they can take a Holy Shield for some more defense at a cost of only 20 points extra. The DAO Union. Very shooty, as one might expect, top to bottom with lots of stealth, which gives a debuff to enemy units outside of 12 inches away to ranged attacks, and good shot on cheaper units so they hit on ranged attacks of 4 up no matter their quality. Speaking of, decent quality and defense outside of chaff units across the board, with an emphasis on small units of tough blasters and good versatility on the admittedly limited options, though drones round out this selection quite well. Vehicles have predictably excellent ranged weaponry options, a pair of Titan choices give you some real presence to play with, and a pair of aircraft round out the list quite well, though transportation is limited to groundcraft only. Most units only have impact or very simple melee weapons for close-in fighting, so I'd recommend not getting into a scrap if you can avoid it. Spotting lasers and similar options allow you to mark targets for bonus to hit with range attacks, letting you really drive home that long-range blaster playstyle. The most expensive unit is a Surge Titan with Pulse Driver, Twin Smart Missile, and Twin Frag Pods for a very American-style defense budget of 1,300-ish points. Your cheapest is going to be the Grunt Squad with Ritual Blades and Pulse Pistols at 90 points. Wouldn't recommend those in that playstyle, though. Dark Elf Raiders. I want to say glass cannons, but that's just not really true. Most of your infantry have 5-up defense with some 4-up offerings, but a large number of them can either take or inherently already have regeneration, which gives you a concerning amount of staying power. On top of that, most units in the army have fast, and a concerning amount of them have poison, which let them counter regeneration in other armies and generally just make defenders have a bad time. Between all that poison and a lot of AP, deadly, and blast options, you have plenty of tools to bring the pain. Vehicle options are varied. The skimmers and jetpikes have very fast for blistering blitzkriegen. Sorry. When you need it, while the other 2 engines fill more niche roles, though there doesn't appear to be a particular super heavy tank, as even the heavy skimmer only has tough 9. A fighter and bomber for aircraft round out an exceptionally aggressive list you can use to give your opponents nightmares. No Titans, though. The most expensive unit is the heavy skimmer with Destroyer Cannon, Energy Ram, Photon Grenade Launcher, Teleport Gate, and Shield of Darkness for a surprisingly conservative 550-ish points. The cheapest offering is Gene Warriors with inherent regeneration for only 75. That Dwarf Guilds! Sorry, not sorry. Predictably stout army with some fantastic specialists, though slow across the board for infantry, which leans into a reliance on vehicles and more specialists for mobility. Of note are the Hammer Elites and Sniper teams with their Magma trait, which completely nullifies regeneration, though snipers require an upgrade to have the trait in their rifles. Average to good quality and defense across the board alongside medical training for regeneration and spectrum scanner upgrades to allow your dwarves to ignore cover, lead into a lumbering but powerful beast of a list. Vehicles are predictably solid with several reliable options for weaponry, allowing them to hit on 2+, and most having transport to get your troops around faster. They have an artillery gun that does some nasty damage with lock-on, making it ignore debuffs to shooting. Gives it some horrific anti-air potential. No aircraft or Titan options themselves, unfortunately, but the versatility of choice in your various specialist and general options presents a nicely coherent list for the Canny Commander. Most expensive unit is the Fortress Tank with Rail M-Cannon, C-Beamer, and Breaker Rockets for a frankly horrific amount of single target removal at the thrifty cost of roughly 700 points. The cheapest offering are the Guardians with their shield wall bonus of +1 to defense for 65 points, though you can replace their pistols with heavy spears for only 5 more to give them AP 1 and counter, allowing them to strike first when charged. Very nice defense. Elven Jesters, bring forth the clowns! Your list is very small, with only 4 infantry, 2 jet bikes, and 2 heroes, but hear me out. Every single one of your units has Furious for extra attacks in melee, Stealth that reduces enemy ranged attacks, and either fast or very fast, making your army a blur on the battlefield. Most units also have Dodge that reduces enemy melee attack rolls, and Strider so they ignore difficult terrain. Combine all of that with a quality of 3 up on average, and you have the definition of shock and awe. Not the most defensive army, as your average is only 5 up, and very few units have tough, the most of which being a heavy jet bike with a measly tough 6, so don't show your rear to a firing squad and expect to survive. Lots of melee and short range power with some okay options for variety. Your heroes also have some pretty awesome upgrades. Stage Master lets your unit move 3 inches after shooting and pop back into cover. Troop Lord gives your unit a +1 to melee, and Solitaire leans very heavily into a solo assassin style with ambush, regeneration, and takedown that allows you to make a single 2-up attack at AP 1 and Deadly 3 once per game, and it snipes. This is a very unique list. I'd imagine is not the easiest to play, but I can see some horrific shenanigans afoot when fielded. This would be a really awesome ally army in a 2v2. The most expensive unit is the jet bikes with EMP cannons and energy glaive for a dirt cheap 400 or so, with your cheapest unit being Fools, no upgrades, but they have Dodge, Fast, Furious, Stealth, and Strider by default. Eternal Dynasty. Very solid list of average to good units possessing quality and defense of mostly 4-up and 3-up, with a pair of 5-up exceptions. Not terribly expensive, at least with the infantry, and fearless across the board for that sweet extra roll on morale checks. Most baseline troops looks to be evasive or incredibly versatile. Your warriors can do pretty much anything you need for a paltry 105 points, and the most expensive upgrade being 40. Oni provide an excellent small elite squad offering with options for ambush and several weapon upgrades to get them out for any conceivable task. Several units can upgrade into stealth or grab a drone that allows them to ignore cover when shooting. For vehicles, you have a good spread of mobility and heavy hitters at all ranges that can all take a decent punch. Of particular note are the ninja infantry and walkers that both have or can upgrade into teleport, which just lets them jump 6 inches at some point during their movement. This army looks very newbie friendly, as its troops have clearly defined roles and look to do them pretty well. You technically have no aircraft, but Titan choices make up for it. One is just a dragon and the rest do Titan things very well in all reasonable flavors. You've got good melee, middle ground, and long range options. Your most expensive unit is that artillery Titan with missile pod. And I have to mention the Dragon Titan, that's a caster 3, and both of them are within 20 of each other at around 1,000. Your cheapest unit is the Cyber Lizards for 65, and they have poison for a little extra utility to go with their Strider. Havoc Brothers, more or less Battle Brothers, but kinda corrupted and really edgy. You still have solid versatility and options for everything under the sun, good infantry for most occasions, powerful vehicles with plenty of weapon options, specialist picks for any given job, and a few offshoots to keep things interesting. All with mostly great quality and defense of 3-up average with some exceptions. There's a notable lack of any scout units, but plenty of ambushers to balance that out. Most of your army have Fear 2, meaning they'll force enemies to take morale tests more often. A Titan with Fear 3 and some frankly terrifying weaponry options, and a literal freaking dragon with fire breathing, complete what is possibly one of my favorite aggressive lists so far outside of the Dark Elves. Did I mention your monsters all have regeneration? That's kind of important. Your most expensive unit is the Havoc Heavy Tank with Havoc Missiles, Plasma Mod, Spiked Ram, and Dozer Blades for around $925. The cheapest offering is the Humble Group of Cultists for $120 with plenty of weapon options for any situation. Quick little addendum for the Havoc Brothers. Yes, I know there are a few variations of them with the different Havoc gods. I will address those here, but not in detail. Generally, the difference between average Brothers units and specifically line ones are fairly straightforward with some exceptions to special rules. War Brothers get Furious and a Berserker unit with Frenzy for more AP on the charge. Change units get Warp rules on some with multiple wounds on enemy defense rolls of 1, as well as stealth across the whole army. Lust tends to have faster, very fast, and Plague gets regeneration across the board, as well as a couple undead units to bolster numbers. Every faction has a Gift of X buff that helps them lean further into their general buffs from the base. High Elf Fleets. Specialists is the name of the game for this army alongside a clear offensive bias. Your quality ranges from average 4-up to good 3-up, but your defense lags behind it by 1 with a couple of exceptions. Of note are your Seer Council, which are casters in their own right and can also act as a support unit for a stronger caster. So psychic heavy shenanigans are very doable and in fact probably encouraged. Heck, you even have a Wraith Fighter aircraft that's caster 2. Spoilers. Barring your heroes and generic Defender Squad unit, you won't find much in the way of loadout options for most of your units. Each unit type is tailor-made to one activity or style that they do very well. Banshees and Scorpions are excellent in melee, Hawks and Spiders are great evasive ambush troops, Dragons and Reapers take care of your heavy weapons needs. All of the versatility is there, you just need to pick a different unit instead of a different loadout. The upside of this is each unit is tailor-made to their specialty. Your shooters mostly have stealth for defense outside of 12 inches, your melees have strider for mobility, almost everything has fast or very fast to help with that offensive bias I mentioned. Upgrades don't so much open new options as much as refine your initial choice. High Elves have a decent set of vehicle choices, focused on mobility over heavy armor, a pair of very nice aircraft, though no transport options among the two, and 2 of the scarier Titans I've seen so far. The most expensive units are those Titans, they being the Wraith Titan, with a staggering Fear 4 and Tough 24, and the Avatar of Flames with regeneration on top of Tough 18 and some truly disturbing melee potential. The Wraith Titan pulls ahead with upgrades, though, with Sun Cannon, Rapid Star Cannon, and 2 times Rapid Shard Cannons. It commands a hearty 1,300 points. Human Defense Force, the EDF deploys. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Do you like heroes? I hope so, because this army is clearly built around having quite a few of them. Your average quality and defense is fairly low at 5-up for most infantry, though elites get the average 4-up in both. Outside of the obvious specialist units like weapon teams or sniper squads, your troops have some good weapon options, and even those specialists have some options within their niche. Most infantry squads have a couple notable upgrades that seem fairly important. Field Radio lets a model within the unit use special abilities like Double Time for extra movement or Focus Fire for extra AP, up to double their usual distance away, in theory giving the hero in command of an equipped squad the ability to affect exactly the unit they need to when they need to. Company Standard allows a nearby friendly unit to get a boost of morale tests, and good old medical training offers regeneration for some more survivability. Vehicles are decent with a quality average of 4-up and the usual 2-up defense most vehicles enjoy, with some offerings notably tougher than other factions. A pair of support guns and a pair of gunships options round out a fairly swarmy or heavy metal army depending on how you want to play it. Most expensive unit by far is a super heavy battle tank with storm cannon, heavy machine gun, 4 sponsoons of laser cannons and twin heavy machine guns alongside Transport 21 and Tough 24 for a jaw-dropping 1,925 points. For reference, the highest default army cost list is 2,000 points. The cheapest offering is a much more reasonable 65-point special weapons team, 50 if you take their rending drum rifles. Human Inquisition. Okay, look, I'm not very experienced with this game, so take this with a grain of salt when I say I'm not sure how this faction is supposed to work. I'll still give it my best shot, though. The Inquisition have some of the spiciest hero units I've seen in their various assassins, all of which have an obscene 2+ to both quality and defense and regeneration across the board. Each has their own thing, from what I can tell, that leans into a particular range or style, though all of them look like they can pretty reliably delete any individual target they come up against. All of them have regeneration, as mentioned, stealth, strider, fast, and tough 6 to make them some of the strongest units encountered so far, though without any customization and pretty harshly expensive. The generic Inquisitor leader is the opposite, very cheap by comparison and clearly reliant on customization options to lean into whatever style you want them to. With stats of 3 up, they can do quite a bit without much trouble. The troops are all chaff as far as I can tell. On average, their stats sit at a mediocre 5 up with some 4 up exceptions here and there. All of them are dirt cheap with only 3 models and have minimal upgrades but specialize reasonably well. The sole exception to this is the Private Guard, which has 10 models and some nice upgrade options, but only at 5 up. A single APC offering gives you a little mobility to make up for almost no ambush in the whole army, barring a single assassin type. And while its options are reasonable, they pale in comparison to most other armor. As best I could tell, this is a list of special operative heroes with some light support options to act as their utility. The most expensive unit is the Sniper Assassin with a terrifying heavy sniper rifle at 585, and the cheapest clocks in at a mere 40 with the Missionary Henchman. Infected Colonies. This list is surprisingly straightforward after dealing with the Inquisition. Throw lots of bodies and a few specialists at the enemy and supplement them with a little armor and a couple nice heroes. Done. Your hero options vary from cheap to elite and reasonable options for all 3. While most of your troops are average to poor stats, they do have some nice upgrade options alongside a couple of unique types to lean into that undead swarm aesthetic. On that note, every single unit has undead, meaning they will never become pinned, but when they fail a morale check, they roll a dice, and on a 1 to 3, they take an additional wound. That's it. That's your whole morale mechanic. No Titan options, but a decent light dropship and some similarly decent vehicles and monsters don't exactly complete the list, but round it out well enough to do what it implies. Again, this army is blatant in what it wants to do. Lots of bodies that don't turn around when you start cutting them down and crush you under sheer weight of numbers. Overall, quality hovers around poor 5+, with a couple worse and some better. The hero provides... Sorry, I do that every time. The heroes provide some nice buffs to their units, though, making them surprisingly tough with the right escort. The most expensive unit is your battle tank with twin autocannons at a fantastically low 425, and your cheapest unit is the Leech Swarms that sport Strider, Tough 3, and Poison for 40 points of pretty much pocket change. Now for the Jackals, my favorite faction and the only one whose STL files I have. They are gorgeous, by the way. The Jackals play hard into the hit-and-run style with generally poor stats but a number of average offerings, though you have some nice options for reliable on a few particular units, letting them hit on 2-ups with their chosen weapons. Troops have reasonable weapon options for their niches. Of particular note are the Vultures with their Stinger Bombs and rending junk swords, giving them free attacks whenever they fly over enemies, and Trackers with their charged ammo on sniper rifles, allowing them to hit with AP4 on their first shots out of ambush. I've gotten some hilarious single target snipes with Trackers, actually, that remove some seriously dangerous enemies on contact. Then you've got Beast Riders and Beast Gunners with Bounding for some mobility and reliable weapon options in their, I believe, hunting hooks and sniper rifles. Yes, you can put sniper rifles on Beast Gunners. No aircraft, but the Great Beast hits like a freight train, and both Titans provide some hilarious brute force in larger games. The heart of the Jackal style is Strider and Carnivore across the board, giving you motion through difficult terrain, and +1 to all melee attacks respectively, making them hit a little harder than you might think. Unfortunately, you have no heavy armor outside of the Great Beast and Titans, and not a whole lot of high damage single target removal. From what I've learned, you really have to play evasive with measured aggression. Focus points more than killing enemies. Your most expensive unit is by far the Mastodon with heavy machine guns for a respectable 1,300-ish points. That gets you Tough 24 and Transport 21. While your cheapest is the Hounds for 75 with options for Furious and Poison in Melee for only 5 extra points each. The Machine Cult. This one strikes me as a flying brick. Moves quick and hits hard, but doesn't have a whole lot of precision. A few unique traits among various weapons stand out as very nice. Phosphor ignores cover on ranged attacks, and Radiation multiplies wounds on defense rolls of 1. A couple heroes have Canticles, which gives an additional AP to shooting attacks for their units. Alongside that, nice shooting are Psalms and Slayer that give additional movement and higher AP against tough units respectively for a nice rounded out damage profile. Troops are reasonably priced with a clear lean towards small squads of tough but slow cyborgs for overt hitting power and decent infantry to fill gaps and or mix it up for a bit cheaper. I'd recommend throwing a cheap hero on your slower walkers to keep them moving with Psalms. Vehicle options include a solid tank and transport and a trio of nice walkers for very reasonable points costs. I can easily see running a Terminator-themed army or something similar. That's Terminator like with Arnie, by the way. We're not talking about GW. No Titans, but a couple nice strike aircraft, one with light transport capability to move your lighter units around. Your most expensive unit is technically the attack craft, but with upgrades. The crawler tank edges it out with Icarus AA systems and a repair arm for around 600 points, and your cheapest would be the Cult Rangers at 90 with Strider and their Radiation R Fusils. Orc Marauders. This is one of those lists you don't even really have to look at to know what it does. It really leans into either stacking up a lot of bullets or a lot of bodies on the enemy front line, and most of your troops put their whole back and chest into that strategy. Goblin units act as cheap chaff with stupidly cheap heroes that make their horrific stats do some work if you throw enough bodies at the problem. And the actual Orc troops have Furious from top to bottom, meaning they multiply hits on natural 6s in melee. While most of your army has bad shot, meaning they only hit on 5-ups ranged attacks, the army has good quality between 3-up and 4-up outside of the 6-up goblins and reasonable defense for an aggressive army between 4-up and 5-up. With some exceptions, of course. The more range-focused units also have Shooty to balance out bad shot, meaning they multiply hits on natural 6s in ranged combat. Vehicles and Walkers provide more of the same without the bad shot debuff and a lot of upgrade options to really customize your convoy. Many have transport and can be given more impact for extra hits on charge, faster speed, Strider to bull through difficult terrain, Shooty, even more transport, and even Shaman to turn your tanks into casters. That was surprising. Going full Mad Max looks to be completely viable here, actually. Goblin Artillery provides a nice support cannon, while the Brutal and Cunning Titan gives some gnarly chonk in larger games. For aircraft, you've got your bomber and attack planes, both of which can take an extra gunner outright and Shooty upgrade. Your most expensive unit is predictably that Titan, with Deathstorm, Minigun, Heavy Flamer, Shooty, and Force Field for regeneration, with a brutal 1,300 or so points, while your cheapest... Look, I'm not trying to list heroes as cheapest options because they're single units, but the Goblin Champ is only 20 points, and you literally slap this guy on anything for extra buffs, and it still comes out as less than 100 with all upgrades combined. Otherwise, you've got the Goblin Herd at 75 with good shot for hits on 4-ups and some decent upgrades to make them reasonably effective chaff. Prime Brothers. This one's easy. Take the Battle Brothers and add more specialist troops that lean heavier into their niche rather than generalize to do a little of everything and increase their defense by 1 across the entire board. You're there. Troops are elite and expensive, but worth the points in most cases, and that glorious 2+ defense outside of the Raider and Infiltrator light infantry makes them incredibly tough. No aircraft or Titans, but vehicle options more than make up for it in my opinion, with plenty of mobility and an ungodly amount of firepower. Fearless across the board, lots of special rules to help with any given unit's niche, all the fixins. There's a notable lack of ambush troops compared to the normal Battle Brothers, which leads me to assume the Primes are a middle ground between them and the Custodians, sorry. legally distinct. Not much else to say that I didn't already with the Battle Brothers. Elite and versatile army with more specialist options and slightly less mobility than their older cousins. Your most expensive unit is the Heavy Anti-Grav Destroyer Tank with Rapid Laser Talon, Twin Laser Cannon, and Heavy Laser Cannon Laser Light Show at about 1,000 points, while your cheapest is the Infiltration Squad at 120. Special note and or addendum for the Prime Brothers. The other versions of Prime Brothers don't have nearly as many differences as the normal Battle Brothers and their factions. It seems to just be extra rules for each unit, so your experience will be more consistent. As before, Blood Brothers get Furious for multiplied attacks on 6s, Dark Brothers get Grim to replace Fearless, Night Brothers get Aegis for the extra defense and anti-caster, Watch Brothers have Purge for more ranged hits on 6s, and Wolf Brothers have counterattack to strike first when charged. The Ratmen Clans. This is the army I have the most experience fighting against, courtesy of my buddy Cade, to whom I asked several questions to help with this entry. Thank you, Cade. Ratmen are a fairly straightforward swarm faction with some serious short-range hitting power and a nice artillery option to give at least a little anti-that-thing compatibility. Overall, their quality and defense are poor at 5-up for most things, or worse, with elites and rat ogres going up to 4-up and 3-up in the cases of the rat ogre's defense. Infantry is another case of specialists wearing several hats within their niche. Stalkers provide your melee chaff with some nice customization to counter specific threats. Crawlers do the same thing with ranged fighting. Saboteurs provide a nice mobility harasser. And elites can do a little of everything. Specialists offer good overall heavy weapon options, and you can put pretty much everything into one unit if you really want to, letting you really dial in what you want them to do. Rat Ogres, I can tell you from experience, are horrific in close range, especially with a leader of some kind bolstering them with abilities. Monsters, again, give out some nice close range assault capability, with the Death Wheel and Drill Tank in particular having some good ambush mobility. No Titan or aircraft, but decent staying power with hero abilities. Your most expensive unit will be that drill tank with twin heavy machine guns, corrosive drill for poison, and transport section to up it to 2,100 or so. Your cheapest is the humble rat swarms at 40 with no upgrades, but innate strider, tough 3, and poison. Rebel Guerrillas. This looks like another one of those hero-reliant armies, though troops look to be more versatile in their loadout options and have some decent synergy. Troops have poor quality on average, with a couple more average offerings in a single 3-up elite, and defense follows the same profile, though vehicles keep their usual 2-up. There are mostly specialists that wear a few hats for infantry. The melee chaff can take wings for ambush, spotters can mark targets, but also be spotters and rocket troops. Elites can do everything but snipe, bikers can lean into ranged harassment or melee charging, etc. And with all of this, the generic rebel leader can follow along with most of them for support. You've even got a Simian champion to throw into heavy melee units if you want a hero that can stand up to a little bit more punishment. For vehicles, your options are very mobile and fairly light, as one might expect. The Assault Vehicle and Combat Walker give you some solid output, but even with the heavy plating upgrade giving protected for less AP, it's still only tough 6 as your best. No Titans and only a light dropship for native support, or native transport, sorry. Though the Jeep can be upgraded to carry a light squad. Your most expensive unit is that light gunship with twin laser cannons and heavy plating for frankly dirt cheap $325. And your most expensive would tie spotters, pioneer ambushers, and bikers at $85. Though it's worth noting that a stock rebel leader is only $35. Robot Legions. Legions have some of the most well-rounded picks in most of the lists I've looked through so far. Their lore choices are varied and have some fantastic abilities to add to their escort units or operate solo if you roll that way. 2 with great weapon choices and 1 with a pretty nice setup for being a walking tank. Infantry have solo across the board, meaning they move 2 inches less on advance and 4 less on charge or rush, but they make up for it with regeneration and robot across the entire army, which makes them the single toughest list in the game that I'm aware of. Their stats back this up. Very few average quality and defense options outside of the bot swarms, and most of them being good at 3+ or better. And that's on top of the regeneration rule, making them incredibly resilient. I'm going to mention that a lot. I'm going to harp on it, in fact. Weapon choices on troops do what you want them to, with a few specialist exceptions that have their particular niche, and that slow across infantry doesn't hurt as much when you look at the rest. Lots of light vehicles listed as core units have Strider, ignoring difficult terrain, or Tunneler, which lets them ambush right into an enemy squad if they really want to. This is on top of the actual vehicles, which have decent transport option, as well as some outright disgusting brute force with the Spider Walker and Doom Tank. They've got a single artillery option in the support platform, which can do that and quite a bit more, with several fantastic weapon choices. A single Titan in the Death Fortress gives you a horrific centerpiece for large battles that can even take Caster, and a pair of aircraft in the Night Transport and Doomfighter provide even more mobility and firepower. Overall, this army is frankly kind of spooky in how effective it can be, though you need to be deliberate and careful with how you maneuver. Your most expensive unit is technically the Wraith Shard and Void Shard. The Wraith Shard with Void Shard and Great Wraith upgrades for around 1300. But I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't mention the Death Fortress with Wraith Shard Vault for that casting and more tough and destruction pulse for basically the memes at a similar price. Your cheapest unit comes in at the very affordable 75 points with the Bot Swarms, which still have regeneration to go with Tough 3 and even Strider. Saurian Starhost. I may have found a new favorite army with this one. The Saurians have fairly limited options with most of their baseline troops, but enough variety among them that you can do most things fairly reasonably and usually for fairly cheap, all things considered. There's not a whole lot of ambush and a clear lean towards close range, but the army has several defensive options and fearless across the board, so a steady press of very competent melee and close range troops is not the worst idea. Predator is a common ability, letting your units get an extra melee attack on a natural 6, not quite as good as Outright Furious, but very present among the melee-centric troops. That said, you still have Gecko Snipers for some long-range capability in your basic troop list. Getting into monsters, you've got more of the same with most of them, but the Triceratops has some excellent long-range artillery options in case you run into enemy air or particularly scary targets. It'll set you back about 500 points for that setup, but the option is there, and your mainline can handle most other issues fairly reliably. On that note, quality varies between Gecko and Saurian units in a fairly direct way. Geckos and most Rider units have a mediocre 5-up in both quality and defense, while Saurians enjoy 4-ups with a couple being 3-ups. Don't know why my voice did that. I've read this several times. My apologies. Monstrous units tend towards the defensive within those numbers, and of course the vehicle-sized beasties all have the usual 2-ups. No dedicated aircraft in the list, but a single Dread Titan can make serious waves depending on how you throw the loadout. The most expensive unit will be that Dread Titan with Behemoth upgrade coming in at a devastating 1500 points, while your cheapest is Cyber Swarms coming in at 65 with the usual Tough, Poison, and Strider, as well as still enjoying that Fearless trait common to the entire roster. Soul-Snatcher Cults. I thought this one was a bit strange until I really started paying attention, then it became fairly simple in my mind. This army seems to be all about scout and focusing down one target at a time while you bum rush the enemy. Most units have either scout or some iteration of fast, or both in the case of a few vehicles. Generally middling stats across the board with a lean towards offense and closer range fighting. The presence of Soul Snatchers and Elite variants gives you some nasty light mobility and casting in both for versatility. Very nice. Default units have some customization or obvious specialty, but generally seem to rely on mass fire or vehicles to do big work to tougher opponents. On that note, vehicles are a pretty important set of units. The attack vehicle has some fantastic support abilities, though they are short-ranged and need to be in the thick of things to make a difference unless you really want them to be a mortar emplacement and plant them next to another artillery piece. Unfortunately, there aren't many long-range artillery pieces outside of the Light Walker, which has some admittedly nasty options for exactly that. Plenty of transport and the battle tank round out a fairly reasonable vehicle list. Your most expensive unit will be that battle tank with rapid heavy plasma cannon, twin super heavy fusion rifle, laser cannon, dozer blade, camo netting, and hunter missile for a reasonable 700 or so points. In stark contrast to that is the very cheap minion quad bike for 90 points, even less if you trade out its onboard heavy flamer for a mining laser or heavy machine gun. Titan Lords. Well, this is the simplest army on the list. You have a bunch of massive stompy robots that have a crapload of tough and amazing stats. All of them at quality 3 up and defense 2 up, making them the single most elite army in the game as far as I'm aware. All of them have the option to take regeneration, which makes them even more horrifically durable. All of them have fear and fearless, and all of them can take a symbol of one of the Havoc gods to pull some funny shenanigans once per game in case they need that extra boost. Weapon options are both good in versatility and effectiveness, with a lot of attacks per weapon to help you fight that action economy, spoilers. And there are plenty of extra weapons that you can bolt on to really make a walking gunboat. It's not an instant win though, you'll always be outnumbered and against a dedicated anti-big thing force with lots of rending deadly or AP. All those numbers will make things difficult. That said, it's basically you playing Mech Warrior while your opponent is playing Call of Duty, and that mental image is hilarious. Alternatively, playing Battletech while your opponent is playing a World War II war game. I don't know them very well. Your most expensive unit is the Heavy King Titan at Fear 4, Tough 30, and Regeneration with Plasma Battle Cannon, Twin Shoulder Missile, Top Missile, and Symbol of Lust for a nasty big AoE chaff wipe once per game for a surprisingly reasonable 1,700. It's reasonable for a city-sized robot with more munitions than the US Army defense budget, okay? Don't at me. The cheapest would be any of the mini Titans, specifically the Errant at base with Fear 2, Fearless, Tough 12, and 2 mini Titan Hammers with Blast 3. Wormhole Daemons. We are finally at the last of the list. This was spicy. So this is actually going to be an extra spicy one. There are no baseline Demons units, therefore I'll do this in the form of shorter entries for completion's sake. Shorter in heavy air quotes. Generally, however, all 4 armies focus on close range fighting, with the only real ranged power coming from the Soul Demon Titans of each faction. Quality and defense tend to hang around average at 4 up, with some variants both better and worse for certain units. Also a note, all units have the demon trait, meaning they all have scout and ambush by default, though you obviously have to pick at the beginning of the game. Started off with the Change Demons. This appears to be the most skirmish-friendly list among the 4, with several unique units offering short-range flame-based attacks, most with reliable and blast. Lots of flamethrowers, basically. When you do close into melee range, most of your units have warp, meaning all enemies that roll 1s on their defense take an additional wound, which is frankly horrific. Not a lot of AP on the list, but Change Warriors have decent weapon options to make things up, and Screechers with their 3 attacks and 2 AP are pretty okay. A particularly unique option comes in the form of Change Horrors, which when killed split into 2 lesser horrors with lesser stats. Lesser Change Horrors can split into Changelings a similar way. I don't know if the interaction is you go from the Change Horrors to lesser horrors to Changelings. I don't know exactly how that works, so take that with a grain of salt. To help you get into close range to take advantage of all of this, every single unit has stealth, meaning shots from beyond 12 inches are at -1. Your most expensive unit is a hero for once in the Avatar of Change with a brutal caster 4 and an exalted power gauntlet to go alongside a symbol of change, letting you throw free hits with warp once a battle, all at a fairly alright 1300-ish. Your cheapest will be the Change Furies for 80 with 2 rending attacks and warp on top of it. Next up are the Less Demons, and the name of the game here is Speed and Aggression. Every unit in your roster has Fast or Very Fast. Combine it with them being demons with their Ambush and Scout, and they make some of the zippiest units in the game. Add in the fact that every single unit has Overload, which lets you roll 2 extra attacks on a natural 6 when you swing, and they make some of the better Shock and Awe type armies I can think of. Not a lot of AP options, but plenty of poison offerings, so in a way it kind of makes up for it. You also have a few unique units that actually do have some decent big thing destroyers, and a particularly interesting Infernal Harpist that has a hilarious Blast 6 attack and summoning. Generally just seems like a lightning fast full frontal assault army that, if you really want to be sneaky, can come from all directions in a horde of blurring blenders. I'm going to have fun with this one. Your most expensive unit is, again, the Avatar of Lust with Exalted Ritual Gauntlet and Symbol of Lust 4 for some massive AoE once per game, and Caster 4 for about 1200 or so. Your cheapest unit will be the Lust Warriors, who still have Fast and Overload. Second to last, we have the Plague Demons. I never want to fight this army. I'm just going to say that right out. You have very few ranged options, but everything in your army has regeneration, and just about every weapon available has poison, many of which have rending on top of it. Not a lot of AP as usual, but cheap troops with poison don't usually need that in my limited experience. Not much else to say about this one. Straightforward in the extreme and not afraid to flaunt it. Your most expensive unit is the Avatar of Plague with Caster 4, Exalted, Plague Gauntlet, and Symbol of Plague, which doles out an AoE of poison hits once per game. Your cheapest unit is a tie between Plague Swarms and Plague Warriors, both of which have regeneration and poison on all attacks. Last, but certainly not least, are the War Demons. Okay, look, I identify the most with this one. I'm very much a Core Knight player if I ever do Chaos in 40k, but it's just not as spicy in my opinion. All of your units have Furious, and you've got some sick anti-caster options, but otherwise it's just fairly standard melee-focused beatstick army with Scout and Ambush across everything. Which sounds good, but kind of compare it with Lust, it feels a little bit lacking in my opinion. Maybe I'm just reading too deep into this, or not deep enough, one of the two. Furious helps a bit by multiplying natural 6s in melee when charging, so aggression will be your friend. Slightly more AP than the other demon armies, but nothing too crazy by comparison. Your most expensive unit will be the Avatar of War with Exalted Flame Gauntlet and Symbol of War, letting you do some free swings once per game at AP 1. And that, ladies, gentlemen, and otherwise, is pretty much it for today. That is my faction breakdown of One Page Rules Grimdark Future, all of their factions, as read by a noob. Hope you guys enjoyed and learned something. If you did, click that subscribe button, roundhouse bell next to it so YouTube Senpai remembers to tell the almighty algorithm channel that I exist whenever I upload. Don't forget to like and comment down below. It gives me all the warm fuzzies. And if you would like to join me personally, there's a Discord link down below. Hop in, ask for the Chaos Crew tag, and you'll be pinged when I'm up to shenanigans. We're mainly a Final Fantasy XIV community at the moment, but I have been really, really pushing tabletop wargaming. And if you're one of my usual subscribers, you have no idea what OPR is, and you want like an actual breakdown of that game, let me know, because I'm more than willing to share this with people. Just that those videos didn't do terribly well when I tried them for D&D, but that's D&D. That's different. Maybe. I don't know. We'll sort it. Anywho, seriously, if you guys enjoyed, please drop me a like. It's the least you can do. I had to record every entry like 4 or 5 times. I just kept stuttering over my own words I was reading so fast. Like, bruh, I'm losing my mind. Y'all have a wonderful day. I will see y'all next round.